There is a building in a village of Ter Apel in Groningen province. It has a maximum capacity of 2,000 people. And this is not a suggestion, it is a legal limit set by a court, agreed with the municipality and written into permits. Right now, there are 2,300 people inside. This is illegal. And everyone knows it's illegal. The people running the building know, the municipality knows, the courts know. And every month, the agency running this building pays a fine for breaking the law. And then they do it again and again. This is not a corruption. This is not a scandal that needs to be uncovered. This is how the system works. So today we are going to talk about what happens when the law becomes optional, when fines replace action, and when 2,000 human beings becomes a number you're allowed to exceed, if you budget for it. Welcome to the Netherlands, where overcrowding isn't a failure, it is an operational model. Ter Apel. Population is 8,600 people. It is a home to the only asylum registration center in the Netherlands. If you arrive seeking protection, you must go there. There is no alternative. The facility was built for 2,000 people. And that number was not picked randomly. It was calculated. It reflects the physical space, the sanitation, the fire codes, the psychological limits of cramming human beings into temporary housing. It is also legally binding. But the Central Agency for the Reception of Asylum Seekers, the COA, has exceeded this limit in every month since 2022. Not occasionally, not in emergency, routinely. And every month they pay the fine, 15,000 euros. Sometimes more, depending on how far over they go. Now, if you or I broke the law and paid a fine, and then immediately broke the same law again for the next month, and the month after that, and the month after that, we would not call that a punishment. We would call that a subscription. COI includes these fines in their annual budget. They are planned expenses, like heating, like payroll, like the cost of doing businesses illegally. Let me say this clearly. The overcrowding at Ter Apel is not a secret. It is not contested. It is documented, reported, publicly acknowledged. And it continues. Because the consequence of breaking the law is a fee. And if you can pay the fee, the law is just a suggestion. But it gets worse. Because while COA is paying the municipality of Westerwolde for breaking the capacity limit, other municipalities are being fined by the national government for not providing housing that would reduce pressure on Ter Apel. So the state agency pays the town for illegal overcrowding. The town pays the state for failing for house people. Money moves, forms are filled, penalties are assessed, right? And 2,300 people sleep in a building designed for 2,000. This is not a system that is broken. This is a system that has chosen. It has chosen that some laws can be violated indefinitely, as long as the penalty is affordable. And it has chosen that human capacity limits are negotiable. And it has done so calmly, so rationally, with full documentation. This is what we mean when we say well-functioning institutions. Let me tell you about a different problem. 18,000 people in the Netherlands have residence permits. Their asylum claims were reviewed and approved. They are legal residents. They have the right to work, to rent housing, and to build a life. But they are still living in emergency shelters, in sport halls, temporary container housing, asylum reception centers. Let me introduce you to someone. His name is Youssef, and he's Syrian. And he's been in the Netherlands for 4 years. 2 years ago, his asylum claims was approved. He received his resident permit and he has the legal right to work. He's still living in a sport hall in Drenthe, and he has a job offer, but he cannot take it because the employer requires a permanent address. He has an address on paper. The sports hall has a postal code. But employers do not want to hire someone whose home address is listed as municipal gymnasium shared dormitory. So Yusuf has legal status and legal work authorization and the legal address and no way to actually use any of it. This is what we mean when we say integration. Municipalities are required by the law to house these people, but they haven't. And COA, the agency running the reception centers, recently stopped applying for social welfare on their behalf. Their reasoning is clear. These people are no longer asylum seekers. They are residents. That makes them the responsibility of municipalities under the Integration Act. The municipalities say, we were not informed. We do not have agreement with the ministry. We were not prepared. So now we have 18,000 people who are legally residents, living in asylum shelters, with no one formally responsible for their income, while two layers of government argue over jurisdiction. These people exist in a category the system has not planned for. Not asylum seekers, not integrated residents, just legally recognized and practically invisible. And here is what I want you to understand. This is not an accident. This is not an oversight. The law says they have status. The law says municipalities must house them. The law says they are entitled to support. But the law does not have a house. The law does not have a budget line. The law does not have an implementation timeline. The law are words. And words without system are just noise. Now, you have probably heard that the housing crisis is caused by immigration. Too many people, not enough space. Refugees taking home from Dutch families. Let me show you what is actually preventing the construction of new homes in the Netherlands. This is a court ruling from 2019. It invalidated the government's nitrogen emissions framework, which means that any projects requiring a permit, housing, roads, grid infrastructure, must individually prove it will not increase nitrogen deposition on protected nature areas. Most cannot, so they don't get built. That ruling was 7 years ago, and we still do not have a replacement framework. Last month, the grid operator, Leander, warned that more than 300 building projects are frozen because the government has not decided how to handle nitrogen limits on electricity infrastructure. We cannot expand the power grid, we cannot connect new buildings, we cannot build houses, hospitals, charging stations for the electric cars we are legally required to switch to. 7 years, multiple cabinets, countless expert reports, and we still cannot build. But we can blame migrants for the housing shortage. Convenient. Because if the problem is the people who are already here, living 4 to a room, paying landlords who should be prosecuted for housing code violations, then you don't have to talk about nitrogen, or grid capacity, or the permits you won't issue, or the 7 years you spend doing nothing. You can just talk about foreigners, and that is very, very easy. One more thing. Municipal elections are in 2 weeks, March 18th. Democracy works like this. Voters choose representatives. Representatives negotiate. Coalitions are formed based on the outcome, unless the outcome has already been decided. In at least 3 municipalities, most political parties publicly announced before the elections that they will not negotiate with FVD, regardless of the results. The reason? Some FVD candidates have ties to far-right organizations. Parties are free to choose their coalition's partner. That is part of the democratic negotiation. But when the choice is announced before voters have spoken, when it becomes a public pre-commitment to ignore the segment of the electorate, no matter how they vote, you are not negotiating, you are nullifying. Polls show that 89% of FVD voters are unaffected by the scandals. They will vote anyway. Their votes will be counted. Their candidates will be seated. And then nothing will happen because the coalition has already been decided. And here is what makes this interesting. Just like CEOA budgets for fines instead of reducing overcrowding. Just like municipalities budget for penalties instead of building housing. These parties are budgeting for governance without a portion of the electorate. They have decided in advance that some votes don't need to be accommodated, that some citizens can be procedurally excluded. Not because their vote won't be counted, but because their votes won't matter. And everyone calls this defending democracy, as if democracy is something that happens before the election, not after. As if the vote is the democratic part, and what comes next is just management. So let me tell you how the system actually works. It works by making the illegal affordable, by making legal rights symbolic, by making democratic procedures decorative. The law says there is a maximum capacity, so we pay a fine and exceed it. The law says residents must be housed, so we give them status and leave them in shelters. The courts say we cannot build without permits, so we blame foreigners for the housing crisis. The voters elect representatives, so we decide in advance which ones don't count. This is not dysfunction. This is not chaos. This is a system that has learned to operate around its own rules, to acknowledge rights without delivering them, to impose laws without enforcing them, to hold elections without accepting their results. And the most impressive part, everyone involved can say with complete honesty, we are following procedure. CEOA fills out the fine payment forms. Municipalities file appeals they know will be rejected. Politicians give speeches about values. Voters cast ballots. And nothing changes. Because the system was never designed to solve these problems. It was designed to manage them, to process them, to document them, to spread the responsibility so thin that no one can be held accountable for the outcome. And in the meantime, 2,300 people are sleeping in buildings built for 2,000. Tonight, tomorrow night, the month after that. But the fines are paid, so everything is in order.